I'm Davy. I'm awesome. And welcome to Davy's Awesome Wrestling, where I review wrestling-related things, all from the perspective of a fan, not an insider. So this week, it's another video where I get to mark out about the wrestling championships. Wrestling championship belts have always been synonymous with wrestling, and have always been one of my favorite parts of wrestling. Now, some time ago, I did my top 11 favorite world championships of all time. But you know what? Most big companies have at least one mid-card championship. The championship for the person who either was the world champion but is not quite ready to get back there, or the up-and-comer who's ready to get to the world championship. It is a very important title, in my opinion, to have a mid-card championship. And in my opinion, just like having a good-looking world championship can very much enhance the product, I think a very good-looking mid-card championship could enhance the product. So therefore, my top 11 mid-card championships. But first, a little criteria. When I put a belt on here, I'm not going to do variations of like when they came out with one that was just a touch smaller to the point you could almost not notice it, or a different strap color, or for example, the AEW TNT Championship is in this list, and it's had a few different variations. It's got the current one where it's on the black strap with the diamond encrusted in the middle of the plate. At one point it had a white strap with a green banner. I'm not going to do that variation, and I'm going to include it with the TBS Championship because they're so similar, with the exception of a banner. I'm also not including a divisional championship in the sense of like a real division. Like there is a TNA X Division Championship in this list, but despite the fact they want to call it that, let's just be realistic, it's always been their mid-card championship. However, like WCW had the Cruiserweight Championship, which was a belt that I really, really loved, which I was thinking about putting in this list, but I was like, you know what? It wasn't a mid-card. It was a completely other division. You had to be a cruiserweight to go after that title, so I'm not including it. In that sense, there will also not be a hardcore division in this, but then again, probably wouldn't be there anyways because I was never a big fan of any of the hardcore championship titles, especially WCW's. So that being said, let's get into the list. In at number 11, the last version of the ECW Television Championship. I did really like this one, and it was definitely a step up from their first one, and it was also its own original thing, unlike their second version. It had a great shape and design. The side plates, I liked that they kind of looked like the sheriff badges, but still had their own hardcore design on the plate itself. It was a good-looking championship. I know people used to like to go like, well, at one point it was more prestigious than their world title. Sorry, but no, it wasn't. Just looked better. And at number 10, the current version of the Ring of Honor Television Championship. Kind of like ECW, where I wasn't a huge fan of the two first variations of them. The first one had a lot of color, a little too much in my opinion on the plates, but also just overall just a very, very boring, plain look. The second one was reminiscent of the six-man tag team championships from WCW, which I was never a fan of either. Just didn't like the shape. Didn't mind how they kind of went together to make it look like it formed one big plate, but just wasn't a fan of it. This one, when they unveiled it, I was like, finally, a really good-looking TV championship. Looks inspired by Japan, in my opinion. In at number 9, one that I don't understand why it gets so much hate. Like, among belt marks, I always hear this one getting so bashed, and that's the WWF European Championship. What was so bad about this title? Sure, it was a little plain looking, but sometimes there's beauty in simplicity. Like, it doesn't always need to be overly flashy. I liked how it had the simplicity of, like, the red banner that's a European Championship, the mostly rectangular, except for at the top, oval shape, with the European flags making a U shape. It was a beautiful championship. I didn't like it when it first debuted and had the green strap, because it just didn't work, in my opinion, but when it went to a black strap with a green backing, loved it. Honestly, I've been among people who've thought, you know, it'd be great if they brought it back, but at this point, how? I will say too many mid-card championships is not a good idea. They got the US title on Raw. They got the Intercontinental title on SmackDown. NXT could have used it, but now they got the North American Championship, which is horrible. And in NXT UK, it wouldn't really make sense. Like, that would have to be their top title. Because how is it you're the top guy with the UK Championship, but the guy who's the champion of the entire continent is beneath you? Wouldn't work. But if they could ever find a way to bring it back, I'd be all for it. In at number 8, a title that I'm kind of sad is gone, but was beautiful while it lasted. Second version of the IWGP Intercontinental Championship. I absolutely adored this championship. The first version that MVP held was pretty cool, but this one was absolutely stunning. I loved the white strap. I've talked about that before in the past. I'm much more of a fan of a classic black strap on these belts, but for some reason white always works too. The style of the gold and the plating, of course it was for New Japan Pro Wrestling, so it had that Japanese look, which I'm a very big fan of. Whether it's championship belt design or like just straight up art, love Japanese style. I love the dome parts on the side plates that just kind of popped out at you. And I was really sad when they unified that with the IWGP Championship to create the IWGP World Championship, especially because, in my opinion, both the IWGP Championship and the Intercontinental Championship are much better looking than the current World Championship they got combined into. But still, I understand it was a natural progression, but I did love this title while it lasted. In at number 7, the TNA X Division Championship. The original version after they cut ties with NWA. Did not like the one when they were part of the NWA at all. As far as the one that came after this, I wasn't the hugest fan of it. It was okay. Kind of reminded me of the Attitude Era Intercontinental Championship, which I wasn't a huge fan of either. Definitely like this one better than the current version they got, which in my opinion just really doesn't have enough going on in it, but I did love this one. It has a simplistic shape to it, both on the sides and main plate. However, I did love the gold lining around the nickel plating. Really worked well, helped the gold to pop more. The simple red X in the middle was a nice homage to their first title, but I like that it actually did say TNA X Division Championship, whereas the NWA one just had an X. In at number 6, another TNA one. I was iffy about putting this one on the list because when it started, it was just a title for a wrestler, his own personal title. It was for Booker T, and that is the TNA Legends Championship, which was later rechristened the TNA Global Championship when they decided to make it an official title. But it made no sense how they had a Global Championship and a World Championship. That's kind of the same thing. So they rechristened it the Television Championship, which fans, we just weren't biting to that. Honestly, in my opinion, its most successful run of this championship was when it was the King of the Mountain Championship. Even though the name itself was awful. It was like, what is that, Jeff Jarrett's championship? What? I don't know. Even though the title itself, in my opinion, was never that prestigious, we never cared that much about it, the belt itself was absolutely stunning. The different colored jewel platings, the crown look at the top. Now, apparently, when TNA commissioned this championship to be made, this was going to be their world championship. I don't know the whole story as to why it didn't become their world championship. It would have made sense, in my opinion, because it definitely looks like a world championship. However, it didn't go about. They had a different world championship, so they decided to have Booker T say this is the Legends Championship, and just kind of took on from there and just never picked up the steam they were hoping for, which is very sad considering this was such a beautiful title. In at number 5, the IWGP United States Championship. This is another one that, like the European Championship, I hear a lot of crap being talked about it amongst belt fans. And I don't understand it. I hear what they're saying. In this case, they're saying the problem is the main plate is too big and don't work with the side plates. I completely disagree. Sure, the side plates are not uniform with the main plate, but that's not always a bad thing, i.e. the WCW Cruiserweight Championship. I like the center plate being mostly gold with the US colors in the middle. I like that even though it's a United States title, they still were like, we're going to do more of a Japanese design with it. I love this title, and I appreciate that New Japan created such a great championship for the United States. In at number 4, the WCW Television Championship. I loved this title. I will say this, at WCW, as much as I wasn't a big fan of their product, most of their belts were very nice looking, especially their mid-carders and Cruiserweight Championship. Great looking belts. A lot of people said that again, that this one was very plain, but I think it worked just fine. The main plate's design was very reminiscent of the Hulk Hogan World Championship that he had in WWF, but whereas it looked similar to that, it was enough of its own. And it looked good on everybody you saw holding it. My only problem with it was that, in my opinion, WCW didn't really build it up enough. It was kind of like their mid-card title was the United States title, and also you can have this one. But it was clearly third place. In at number 3, the AEW TNT Championship. I have loved this belt since the moment it was finished. quickly shot up the ranks as being in my top 11 favorite championships, which I will redo someday. When it first debuted, it was unfinished, it was in the middle of the pandemic, they had announced it and that it would be there at Double or Nothing, but they weren't able to get it completely done in time because of no access to certain materials. However, once they finished it, it was beautiful. And I will say, as much as I like the black strap, the red strap worked even better when it first debuted. But they retired that one for Brody Lee after he died because he was the second person to have that championship. And that's when they went to this black strap with the red backing, which I think works really well. They've later and since added the diamond jewel encrusting in the middle instead of it just being blank. I kind of like it a little bit better when it was blank, just because with the diamond encrusting, it's just a little too much going on, but it's still nice. My favorite version of this was actually Miro's championship, where he had the white strap with the green banner underneath, but I still like this one. I kind of include this with the TBS championship, the women's mid-card title, just because they're so similar, but I would have to give this one the slight edge, just because I'm not a big fan of the baby blue, and the TBS championship has the baby blue banner, but they're both still really good looking belts, and bravo, this is absolutely gorgeous. In at number 2, my favorite championship belt that ever came out of WCW. WCW United States title. The last version. The one that was a 3-plate belt instead of a 5-plate belt. I just thought it worked better than the 5-plate belt. But still, if I remember correctly, this was the Jamar version. The previous one was the Reggie Parks version. Either way, they both looked really good. Just like this one, slightly better. The big eagle on the front really shines. And of course, there's not a lot of color except for at the top of the eagle. You got the American flag going on there. I've talked about it before. I'll talk about it again. Years ago in 2012, when WWE unveiled an Intercontinental title that was a throwback to their old Intercontinental title, I was really hoping they were going to follow suit with the U.S. title. Especially because I hated that one, and I can't believe that one lasted as long as it did. But sadly, that never came to fruition, even though it should have. Because this one was not only, in my opinion, WCW's best-looking championship they ever had, but easily the best United States championship we've ever had, and honestly, one of the best belt designs that's ever come around, period. And then my number 1 favorite mid-card championship of all time is the WWF Intercontinental title. The one that started as the Reggie Parks version, later became the JMR version, which there wasn't a whole lot of difference between the two. They took the WWF part and had it go from red to solid gold. And the JMR one was a slight bit smaller, but not enough to really notice. Either way, it was a very simplistic but very beautiful design. Again, that's one of the things that people have knocked on this one. Most people love this one. It's a fan favorite, but some people talk about the plate itself was just too plain, there wasn't enough going on. Again, I disagree. Sometimes less is more. The other argument was that at the time, this one was actually bigger than the World Championship, so they felt like this should have been the World Championship and that should have been the Intercontinental Championship. I disagree. To me, the design of the Wing Eagle Championship only worked as a world title, not as a mid-card. This one, sure, could have been a world championship, but in my opinion, it didn't matter which one was bigger. However, I remember my brother and I talking about it, and he would say that he loved this more than the world title, and I'd be like, you know what, I disagree slightly, but not enough to really argue about this, because they were both very gorgeous, stunning belts. And in my opinion, there's yet to come a mid-card championship more stunning than this classic Intercontinental Championship. So there you have it. That's my wrestling review this week. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, hit the little bell so you get notifications when I post new videos, and leave a comment. Tell me if you agree with my list. Tell me if you disagree with my list. Tell me which mid-card championship was your favorite. Tell me if there's one that you think I should have put in the list. Love you guys.